Germany's war machine was crushed, and its soldiers were shocked by America's industrial might. Thousands of German POWs arrived in the U.S., only to be amazed by the country's sheer scale and production power. They had never seen anything like it before. Many of us struggle to understand what it was like for these German soldiers to go from fighting on the front lines to being imprisoned in a foreign country. We wonder how they felt seeing the enemy's strength up close. The U.S. was a major player in World War II, but its industrial capabilities were largely unknown to the German army. The contrast between their own war-torn country and the thriving U.S. economy must have been staggering. Today we're going to explore what happened when these German POWs arrived in the U.S. We'll discover how they were treated, what they saw, and how it changed their perspective on the war. You'll learn about the daily life of a German POW in America, from their living conditions to their interactions with American soldiers. We'll examine the impact of the U.S. industrial might on the German soldiers and how it affected their morale. We'll take a journey through the experiences of these German POWs, from their initial shock to their eventual adjustment to life in America. Along the way, we'll uncover some surprising stories and fascinating facts about this little-known chapter in history. If you're interested in World War II American history, or just want to learn something new, then you're in the right place. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the most fascinating and unknown stories from history. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you can stay up to date on our latest videos. We're glad you're here and we look forward to sharing this incredible story with you. Germany's invasion of Poland marked the beginning of World War II. This act of aggression prompted the United States to join the war. As the war raged on, the U.S. found itself capturing large numbers of German soldiers. These prisoners of war, or POWs, were shipped to the United States for detention. One such POW was a young German soldier named Hans. Hans had grown up in a small town in Germany, where he was taught that America was a weak and inferior nation. But when he arrived in the U.S., he was shocked by what he saw. Hans was detained in a POW camp in the state of Texas. The camp was surrounded by vast fields of cotton and wheat, which stretched as far as the eye could see. Hans was amazed by the sheer scale of American agriculture. In Germany, farms were small and inefficient, but here, everything seemed to be done on a massive scale. The tractors were bigger, the fields were larger, and the crops were more abundant. Hans couldn't believe that a single nation could produce so much food. As Hans worked on the farm, he began to notice the incredible machinery that the Americans used. The tractors were powerful and efficient, the plows were sharp and well-maintained, and the irrigation systems were complex and sophisticated. Hans had never seen anything like it before. In Germany, farming was a labor-intensive process that relied on manual labor and primitive tools. But here, the Americans seemed to have mechanized every aspect of farming. Hans's experience on the farm was just the beginning of his introduction to America's industrial might. As he traveled to different parts of the country, he saw the massive factories that produced cars, airplanes, and ships. He saw the sprawling cities with their towering skyscrapers and bustling streets. And he saw the incredible network of roads, highways, and railways that connected everything. Hans was amazed by the sheer scale and complexity of America's industrial infrastructure. The key insight that Hans gained from his experience was that America's industrial might was not just about producing goods, but also about producing ideas. The Americans seemed to have a culture of innovation and experimentation, where people were encouraged to try new things and take risks. This culture of innovation had led to the development of incredible technologies, from airplanes to computers, and had transformed the way people lived and worked. As Hans reflected on his experience, he realized that his initial perception of America had been completely wrong. The U.S. was not a weak and inferior nation, but a powerful and dynamic country that was capable of achieving great things. And it was this realization that would stay with Hans for the rest of his life, shaping his views on America and its place in the world. Now, let's take a closer look at how the U.S. government handled the large numbers of German POWs, and how this affected the outcome of the war. So, what was it like for German POWs to arrive in the United States? One fascinating story is about a POW camp in Oklahoma. This camp was set up in a small town, and locals were surprised to see German soldiers walking around. At first, people were scared. They didn't know what to expect from these enemy soldiers. But as time passed, something interesting happened. The German POWs started working on local farms and factories. They were amazed by the machines and technology used in America. One German soldier, named Hans, was shocked by the size of the farms. In Germany, farms were small and family-owned. But in Oklahoma, farms were huge and used massive machines to harvest crops. Hans had never seen anything like it. He was also surprised by the amount of food available. In Germany, food was scarce during the war. But in America, there was plenty of food and the POWs were fed well. Hans even gained weight during his time in the camp. The POWs were also introduced to new foods like hamburgers and milkshakes. They had never tasted anything like it before. Some even thought the milkshakes were a type of soup. The Americans were amused by the Germans' reactions to these foods. But what's really interesting is how the POWs' perceptions of America changed over time. At first, they saw America as an enemy nation. But as they worked and lived alongside Americans, they started to see the country in a different light. They realized that America was a complex and diverse nation, full of different cultures and ideas. The POWs even started to learn English and appreciate American music and movies. This experience had a profound impact on the German soldiers. When they returned to Germany after the war, they shared their stories and experiences with others. They helped to change the way Germans perceived America and Americans. This story highlights the power of cultural exchange and understanding. Even in the midst of war, people from different nations can come together and learn from each other. The German POWs experience in America was a unique one, but it shows that even the most unlikely of circumstances can lead to greater understanding and appreciation. As we look at the impact of America's industrial might on the German POWs, it's clear that their experience was just the beginning of a larger story. The effects of this experience would be felt for years to come, shaping the way Germans and Americans interacted and understood each other. This leads us to the next part of our story, where we'll explore how the German POWs experience in America influenced their views on technology and innovation. What happened when German POWs saw American factories for the first time? They were amazed. One prisoner, Hans, worked in a factory that made airplanes. He said it was like a small city. There were hundreds of machines and thousands of workers. Hans had never seen anything like it. In Germany, factories were much smaller. They didn't have as many machines or workers. Hans was shocked by how much food the American workers ate. They had big meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In Germany, food was scarce. People were lucky to have one big meal a day. Hans worked on a production line that made airplane parts. He was amazed by how fast the parts were made. Machines cut and shaped metal quickly and accurately. In Germany, this work was done by hand. It took much longer to make one part. Hans saw how American workers used machines to do many tasks. This made their work easier and faster. The factory where Hans worked was very organized. Each worker had a specific job. They worked together like a well-oiled machine. Hans was impressed by how everything ran smoothly. In Germany, factories were not as organized. Workers did many tasks and it was chaotic. Hans and other German POWs learned a lot from their experiences in American factories. They saw how industrial might helped America win the war. They realized that Germany's smaller, less efficient factories were no match for America's industrial power. This was a key insight for Hans and the other prisoners. The experience of Hans and other German POWs in American factories teaches us about the importance of industrial might. It shows how a country's ability to produce goods quickly and efficiently can give it a big advantage. This is still true today. Countries with strong industries are often more prosperous and powerful. Now, let's look at how the industrial might of America affected the daily lives of German POWs. We'll explore how they adapted to their new surroundings and the challenges they faced in the next section. One German POW, Hans, still remembers the day he arrived in Kansas. He was shocked by the endless fields of wheat and corn. Back in Germany, food was scarce, and seeing so much abundance was overwhelming. Hans was taken to a farm where he would work for the next few years. The farm was huge, with hundreds of acres of land and dozens of machines. Hans had never seen such advanced technology before. In Germany, most farms were small and family-owned. They relied on manual labor and basic tools. But in America, farming was a big business. The farms were like factories with machines doing most of the work. Hans was amazed by the efficiency and productivity of the American farm. He saw how the farmers used tractors, plows, and harvesters to cultivate and harvest the crops. He also saw how the farm was organized, with each worker having a specific task to do. Hans's job was to help with the harvest. He worked long hours, but he was paid well and treated fairly. He was also given food and shelter, which was a big improvement from the conditions in Germany. As Hans worked on the farm, he began to realize the significance of America's industrial might. He saw how the country's advanced technology and efficient systems allowed it to produce so much food and goods. He also saw how this abundance had a big impact on the lives of Americans, who had access to cheap and plentiful food. Hans's experience on the farm was a real eye-opener. He had never seen anything like it before. He began to understand why America was so powerful and prosperous. The country's industrial might was not just about machines and technology, it was also about the people and the systems that made it all work. Hans realized that America's strength came from its ability to produce and innovate, and that this had a big impact on the world. As Hans looked out at the endless fields of wheat and corn, he felt a sense of wonder and awe. He had never seen so much abundance in his life. He realized that America's industrial might was not just about making things, but also about making life better for people. The food, the machines, and the systems all worked together to create a world of plenty. And Hans, a young German POW, was grateful to be a part of it, even if only for a little while. Now, let's take a closer look at how America's industrial might affected the daily lives of German POWs, from the food they ate to the work they did. So, what happened when German POWs arrived in America? They were shocked by the industrial might. One specific story that stands out is of a POW named Hans. Hans was a young soldier from a small town in Germany. He had never seen anything like the factories and machines in the United States. When Hans arrived at a POW camp in Illinois, he was amazed by the size and efficiency of the American factories. He had never seen so many machines and workers in one place. The camp where Hans was held was near a large factory that produced tanks and other military vehicles. Hans and other POWs were assigned to work in the factory, and they were amazed by the speed and efficiency of the production line. Hans remembered that in Germany, it would take weeks or even months to produce one tank. But in America they were producing tanks in just a few days. The German POWs were shocked by the amount of resources and manpower that the Americans had. They had never seen anything like it before. The factory was a huge facility with thousands of workers and machines. Hans was assigned to work on the assembly line, where he helped to build tanks and other military vehicles. He was amazed by the precision and speed of the American workers. They worked quickly and efficiently, and they were able to produce a large number of tanks and vehicles in a short amount of time. Hans also noticed that the American workers were well-fed and well-clothed. They had access to good food, clean water, and comfortable living conditions. This was a big contrast to the conditions in Germany, where many people were struggling to survive. The German POWs were shocked by the wealth and prosperity of America. They had never seen anything like it before. The experience of Hans and other German POWs in America had a profound impact on their views of the war and the world. They realized that Germany was no match for the industrial might of the United States. They saw firsthand the power and efficiency of the American factories and the wealth and prosperity of the American people. This experience changed their perspective on the war and made them realize that Germany was fighting a losing battle. The story of Hans and other German POWs in America is a fascinating one. It shows how the experience of being a POW in a foreign country can change a person's perspective on the world. It also highlights the significant difference in industrial might between Germany and the United States during World War II. Now, let's take a closer look at how the experience of German POWs in America affected their views on the war and the world. In the next section, we'll explore how the German POWs were treated by the American people and how this treatment affected their attitudes towards America and the war. One German POW, named Hans, still remembers the day he arrived at a prison camp in Oklahoma. He was shocked by the sheer scale of the camp's facilities. Thousands of prisoners were housed in rows of wooden barracks, surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers. But what really caught Hans' attention was the food. He had never seen so much food in his life. The prisoners were served 3 hot meals a day with plenty of bread, meat, and vegetables. Hans recalled that back in Germany food was scarce, and people were lucky to get 1 hot meal a day. He was amazed by the abundance of food in America, and it made him realize just how poorly fed the German army was. The prisoners were also given access to medical care, which was a luxury they never had in Germany. Hans saw men who had been wounded in battle receive treatment and recover from their injuries. The prison camp was also a place of hard work. Prisoners were assigned to various tasks, such as farming, construction, and manufacturing. Hans was assigned to work on a farm, where he learned about American agricultural practices. He was impressed by the efficiency and productivity of the farm, and he realized that America's industrial might was not just about weapons and war machines, but also about its ability to produce food and other essential goods. Hans' experience in the prison camp was a real eye-opener. He began to understand that America's strength was not just about its military power, but also about its economic and industrial capabilities. He saw how the country's industrial might was used to produce goods, feed its people, and support its war effort. This realization made him question the Nazi propaganda he had been fed back in Germany, which portrayed America as a weak and decadent nation. As Hans looked around the prison camp, he saw men from different backgrounds and cultures, all working together. He met prisoners from Italy, France, and other countries, and he realized that they were all in the same situation. They were all far from home, struggling to survive and trying to make sense of the war. This shared experience created a sense of camaraderie among the prisoners, and Hans formed friendships with men he would never have met otherwise. The experience of being a POW in America was a turning point for Hans. It made him see the world in a different light, and it challenged his assumptions about America and its people. He realized that there was more to America than just its military power, and that its industrial might was a key factor in its success. As Hans reflected on his time in the prison camp, he began to think about what the future held, not just for himself but for the world. He wondered what would happen after the war and how the world would rebuild. This curiosity would lead him to explore new ideas and perspectives, which would be the focus of the next part of his story. So, here's a fascinating story about a German POW named Hans. He was a young soldier, barely 20 years old, when he was captured by American forces in France. After being shipped to the United States, Hans found himself in a prison camp in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. At first, he was shocked by the vast open spaces and the sheer size of the American landscape. But what really blew his mind was the industrial might of the United States. Hans had never seen so many machines, factories, and trains in his life. He was amazed by the efficiency and scale of American production. In the prison camp, he met other German POWs who shared similar stories of shock and awe. They had never seen anything like it before. One of Hans' friends, a POW named Fritz, had been a mechanic in Germany. He was fascinated by the American cars and trucks, which were much bigger and more powerful than anything he had seen in Europe. The German POWs were also impressed by the food. They had heard stories about American abundance, but they never thought it was true. In the prison camp, they were fed 3 meals a day with plenty of meat, bread, and vegetables. Hans remembered that in Germany they were lucky to get 1 meal a day, and it was usually just bread and potatoes. The American food was a revelation, and the German POWs ate as much as they could. But what really changed Hans' perspective was when he started working in an American factory. He was assigned to a plant that produced aircraft parts, and he was amazed by the technology and the machinery. He saw how the Americans used assembly lines, conveyor belts, and other innovations to produce parts quickly and efficiently. Hans realized that this was the secret to America's industrial might, the ability to mass-produce goods and get them to the market fast. As Hans worked in the factory, he began to understand the American way of life. He saw how the workers were treated with respect and dignity, and how they were paid a decent wage for their work. He realized that the American economy was based on consumption and production, and that the country's industrial might was the key to its prosperity. Hans' experience in the United States changed his perspective on the war and on the world. He began to question the Nazi ideology and the reasons why Germany had started the war. The key insight that Hans gained from his experience was that industrial might is not just about producing goods, but also about producing ideas and innovation. He saw how the Americans were constantly looking for new ways to improve their production processes, and how they were willing to take risks and experiment with new technologies. Hans realized that this was the secret to America's success, and that it was something that Germany and other countries could learn from. As Hans' story shows, the experience of German POWs in the United States was a complex and multifaceted one. They were shocked by the industrial might of America, but they also learned from it. They gained a new perspective on the world and on the war, and they began to question their own assumptions and ideologies. In the next section, we'll explore how the experience of German POWs in the United States affected their lives after the war, and how it shaped their views on politics, economy, and society. So, What happened to these German POWs after they finished their time in the United States? One fascinating story is about a man named Arno Staley. He was a young soldier when he was captured and brought to America. At first, he was shocked by the industrial might of the country, just like many other prisoners. But as time passed, he started to see the human side of his captors. Arno worked on a farm in Nebraska, where he formed a close bond with the family who owned it. They treated him with kindness and respect, despite being the enemy. He learned about their daily lives, their struggles, and their dreams. In return, Arno shared his own stories about growing up in Germany and his experiences during the war. This exchange of stories and ideas had a profound impact on Arno. He began to question the propaganda he had been fed back home, and he started to see the war from a different perspective. He realized that the Americans were not the monsters he had been told they were, but rather ordinary people who were trying to live their lives and protect their families. After the war, Arno was repatriated to Germany, but he never forgot the family he had grown to love in Nebraska. He kept in touch with them through letters, and eventually he returned to the United States to visit them. This time, however, he was not a prisoner but a guest. Arno's story is a powerful example of how even in the midst of war and conflict, human connections can be made. It shows that even the most unlikely of people can form bonds and learn from each other. And it highlights the importance of understanding and empathy in breaking down barriers and building bridges between nations. The key insight here is that the experience of German POWs in the United States was not just about industrial might or military power, but about human relationships and personal growth. It was about the ability to see beyond the enemy label and to connect with people on a deeper level. As we conclude this story, it's worth thinking about how these experiences can inform our own lives and our own relationships with people from different backgrounds and cultures. By sharing stories and ideas, we can break down barriers and build bridges, just like Arno and the family in Nebraska did. And who knows, maybe one day we'll explore more stories like Arno's, and discover the power of human connection in the most unexpected places. As we reflect on the experiences of German POWs in America, it's clear that their encounters with the country's industrial might had a profound impact on their perspectives. They were struck by the sheer scale and efficiency of American production, which was a far cry from the devastation and scarcity they had witnessed in their own war-torn country. This exposure not only broadened their understanding of the world but also challenged their preconceived notions about the United States and its people. For those who were once sworn enemies, the experience of being a POW in America was a transformative one. It forced them to confront their own biases and misconceptions, and to see the humanity in those they had previously viewed as enemies. This transformation was not just about gaining a new perspective, but also about discovering a new sense of empathy and understanding. As they navigated this new reality, they began to see the world in a different light, and their experiences had a lasting impact on their lives. One thing that stands out from their stories is the importance of seeking out new experiences and perspectives. By doing so, we can challenge our own assumptions and gain a deeper understanding of the world around us. So, take a moment to reflect on your own life and consider what you can do to broaden your horizons. Whether it's reading a book about a different culture, traveling to a new country, or simply striking up a conversation with someone from a different background, there are countless ways to expand your understanding of the world. This video found you for a reason. Perhaps you're curious about history, or maybe you're looking for a new perspective on the world. Whatever the reason, I'm glad you're here, and I hope that the stories of these German POWs have inspired you to think differently about the world and your place in it. If you found this video insightful, be sure to like and subscribe for more content that will challenge your perspectives and inspire you to think differently. As you go about your day, remember that the world is full of complex and multifaceted stories, and that sometimes the most unlikely of experiences can lead to profound transformations. The stories of these German POWs serve as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the potential for growth, understanding, and transformation. By embracing this mindset, we can work towards creating a more compassionate and empathetic world, one that values the complexity and diversity of human experience.